Welcome to Psyche Talks.
It's great to be here.
Today we're diving deep into something, well, kind of fascinating. How really small things can sometimes spark massive changes. We're digging into Malcolm Gladwell's work on tipping points, trying to figure out, the hidden forces that make ideas or trends just spread like crazy.
Exactly. Our mission today isn't just to define what a tipping point is. We want to get under the hood, understand the mechanics behind it all,
Right.
what actually makes something hit that critical point, and boom, it's everywhere. Think of it like the science of social epidemics.
Yeah, social epidemics. Yeah. And we're not talking dry theory here. We're looking at real head scratchers, like how hush puppies, remember those? Suddenly got cool again out of nowhere.
Right. Or the huge, unexpected drop in crime in New York City.
Exactly. So for you listening, especially if you like getting knowledge quickly, but also getting the full picture, this dive into surprising links and those aha moments should be, well, pretty interesting.
Let's hope so.
Okay, so let's start there. The core idea. What exactly is a tipping point?
Okay, so fundamentally, a tipping point is that moment, that critical mass, the threshold, maybe like a boiling point, where an idea or a trend or even a social behavior crosses some line and just starts spreading incredibly fast.
Like flipping a switch.
Pretty much. It's like something catches fire and what was maybe just a little spark suddenly turns into this huge blaze. The analogy to an epidemic is actually really useful here.
Right, the epidemic idea. Tell us a bit more about that connection.
Well, think about how a virus spreads, right? Through contact, infecting more and more people. Gladwell argues that ideas, products, behaviors, they can spread in a similar way. Through exposure, through social influence.
Okay.
Our early examples, hush puppies and NYC crime, they really show this. The hush puppies thing wasn't some giant ad campaign.
Right.
It was apparently just a small group of influential people in downtown Manhattan starting to wear them. They exposed their friends, their circles, essentially infecting them with this trend.
And the crime drop.
Same kind of idea, but in reverse. That massive drop in crime wasn't because every single potential criminal suddenly changed their ways overnight.
Right, that seems unlikely.
Exactly. It seems more like subtle shifts, maybe in specific situations or environments, had this ripple effect, like an anti-crime virus spreading through the city, if you will.
Huh. So it's like this invisible chain reaction. What else defines these kinds of social epidemics?
Another really key thing is this idea of little changes having big effects.
Okay.
In both those cases, relatively small, almost hard-to-spot changes seem to lead to these huge, dramatic outcomes. For New York, maybe it was small changes in policing tactics or the crack epidemic fading or even subtle population shifts. Nothing massive on its own.
But together.
But together, or maybe just hitting the right leverage point, they coincided with this enormous drop in crime. And with hush puppies, you're talking maybe, a few dozen kids in one neighborhood?
Yeah.
Triggering this global fashion trend. It's pretty wild.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
That small, focused actions can have these massive results. What's the third characteristic you mentioned?
The third one is the speed of change. These things don't usually creep up slowly. They tend to happen suddenly, sharply. If you look at a chart of NYC crime rates over the decades, you see this really distinct pattern. Gladwell calls it a giant arch. Rises steeply, stays high for a while, and then around 1992, it just drops. Fast.
Not a gentle slope down.
No, not at all. It hits a point and falls off a cliff. And the hush puppies come back too. Once it caught on with those initial groups, it spread relatively quickly.
Okay, so we've got contagiousness, small causes leading to big effects, and rapid change. Now, Gladwell lays out 3 rules that kind of govern these epidemics. Let's get into the first one. The law of the few. Who are these few?
Right. The law of the few. This basically says that the success of these social epidemics often depends heavily on a very small number of exceptional people. People with specific, kind of rare social gifts.
Okay.
Gladwell breaks them down into 3 types: connectors, mavens, and salesmen.
Connectors. That makes me think of people who just know everybody. Is that it?
That's a big part of it, yeah. Connectors are people who have these incredibly large and diverse networks of friends and acquaintances.
Diverse is key.
Very key. They act like social hums, linking together different groups or social circles that wouldn't normally interact. Their real power isn't just the number of people they know, but the variety of worlds they move between. They bridge communities.
Ah, I see.
Think about Stanley Milgram's famous small world experiment back in the day. It showed how connected we all are, often through just a handful of these key people.
The 6 degrees of separation idea.
Exactly, and connectors are often those crucial links in the chain.
Can you give us some examples of these connectors in action?
Well, Paul Revere's Midnight Ride is a classic example Gladwell uses. Why was his ride so much more effective than William Dawes, who rode a similar route?
Good question.
Because Revere was a massive connector. He knew people everywhere, across different social strata, different towns. He knew exactly who to talk to, how to get the word out quickly and effectively through his network.
Unlike Dawes.
Apparently, Dawes just didn't have that same breadth of connections. Another example is someone like Lois Weisberg in Chicago.
Yeah.
She was known for just effortlessly connecting people from totally different worlds: artists, politicians, academics, business folks.
Wow.
It relates to Mark Granovetter's research, too, on how people find jobs. Surprisingly often, it's not our close friends, but our weak ties acquaintances who move in different circles that link us to new opportunities. Connectors are masters of weak ties.
Fascinating. Okay, so connectors are the social glue, the network hubs. What about mavens? What's their role?
Mavens are different. They're the information specialists. These are the folks who just know a lot about certain things, and they love sharing that knowledge to help other people.
So, like, the person you ask before you buy a new camera, pick a restaurant.
Yeah. Exactly like that. Their motivation isn't really about persuading you. It's about educating you, helping you solve your problem, make a good choice. They're information brokers, essentially, driven by the desire to know and to help.
Gotcha. And who's an example of a maven?
Gladwell talks about a guy named Mark Alpert who seems to be this fountain of consumer knowledge, reads everything, compares prices, even calls up companies with corrections.
Yeah.
He just accumulates information and enjoys sharing it to help friends and acquaintances navigate the marketplace. And interestingly, Paul Revere wasn't just a connector.
Oh.
He was also a maven. He wasn't just spreading the alarm. He was actively gathering detailed intelligence about British troop movements and sharing that critical information. He was a source people trusted.
Right. So mavens bring the crucial information, the substance, to the table, which leaves us with the salesman. What's their special skill?
Salesmen are the persuaders. They have this knack, this kind of natural ability to convince people. And it often goes way beyond just the words they use.
So?
It's often about nonverbal stuff, subtle cues, building rapport really quickly, this thing called interactional synchrony.
Interactional synchrony. What's that?
It's like an unconscious dance people do when they connect. Mirroring each other's body language, maybe head nods, expressions, even the rhythm of speech, it builds this subconscious feeling of connection and trust.
Okay.
And really effective salesmen seem to be naturals at initiating and maintaining this synchrony.
Yeah.
It makes people more receptive to what they're saying, even if they don't realize why.
So it's a kind of charisma, but maybe more technical?
You could say that. It's about creating that bond, that resonance. Gladwell mentions a super persuasive financial planner named Tom Gow as someone who just exudes this ability.
Yeah.
And think about studies on TV news anchors like Peter Jennings. Research suggested his facial expressions alone, even subtle ones, could influence viewers' voting preferences, sometimes without them even knowing it.
Wow, that's subtle influence.
It really is. Salesmen just have that ability to connect and persuade on a deep, often nonverbal level.
Okay, these three types, connectors, mavens, salesmen, they really drive things according to this law of the few. Let's move to the second rule, the stickiness factor. What makes an idea stick?
Right. The stickiness factor, this is all about the message itself. Is the idea or the product or the behavior actually memorable? Does it have an impact? Does it make you want to change or act?
So it's not enough just to spread the word. The word itself has to be sticky.
Exactly. It has to have some quality that makes it lodge in people's minds and actually influence them. It's about making the message count.
What makes something sticky then? What are the ingredients?
Well, there isn't one single formula, but several things matter. How the information is presented, its structure, its format, that's crucial.
Yeah.
Sometimes simple repetition helps reinforce it, but maybe the most important thing is making it understandable, practical, and personally relevant to the audience, tailoring it so it clicks with them.
Can you give us some examples of stickiness in action?
Sure. Think about those old Columbia Record Club ads, the 12 records for a penny kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
They apparently made one small change, adding a little gold box to the order form in magazines and telling people on TV to look for it to get an extra free record.
Just a little box.
Yeah, but it turned passively looking at an ad into a mini treasure hunt. It made the action concrete, engaging, more memorable. Response rates apparently shot up.
Well, okay.
Or Howard Levanthal's experiment with tetanus shots for students. He gave different groups information about the dangers of tetanus, Some just got the info, others got the info, plus a map of the campus health center with the clinic hours circled.
Good.
The group that got the map and hours. Dramatically higher vaccination rates. The threat became less abstract, more actionable. They knew exactly where to go and when. That practical detail made the message stick and spurred action.
Those little practical things make a huge difference. What about in media?
Yeah, the evolution of kids' TV shows like Sesame Street and Blue's Clues is really illustrative here. Sesame Street, when it started, was really fast-paced, lots of short segments, kind of like commercials.
Right, try to hold kids' attention.
That was the theory. But research later showed kids actually learned better when things slowed down, when they had time to process. Enter Blue's Clues.
Which was very different.
Very different. Much slower pace, lots of repetition following one story. It was designed very deliberately based on how young children actually learn and pay attention. And it turned out to be incredibly sticky, incredibly effective.
So stickiness isn't always about being flashy. It's about being clear, relevant, maybe even simple, and fitting how people think.
Exactly. Understanding the audience and making the message work for them.
Okay, that's stickiness. Now for the third rule, the power of context. How does the environment play into all this?
The power of context is huge. It basically says that epidemics are really sensitive to the situations and circumstances they occur in, the time, the place, the conditions they can make or break, whether something tips.
So the same idea might take off in one place but fizzle out in another.
Precisely. The environment matters enormously. What kind of environmental factors are we talking about?
Well, it can be the physical environment, social norms, even group size. A classic example is the broken windows theory.
Ah, yeah, I've heard of that. The idea is that visible signs of minor disorder, things like graffiti, broken windows, people jumping subway turnstiles, can send a signal that maybe no one cares or no one's in charge.
And that encourages worse behavior.
That's the theory. It creates an environment where more serious crime feels more permissible, maybe even inevitable. The cleanup of the New York City subway system in the 80s and 90s is often held up as an example.
They really focused on graffiti and fair beating first.
Exactly. Addressing those seemingly small signs of disorder was seen as key to changing the overall context and eventually bringing down serious crime rates on the subway. The environment sent a different message.
So the environment whispers cues to us about how to behave. What other ways does context work?
Group size is another fascinating contextual factor. Gladwell talks about the rule of 150.
Rule of 150.
Yeah, it's this idea proposed by anthropologist Robin Dunbar that there seems to be a cognitive limit to the number of people we can maintain stable social relationships with. Relationships where we know who everyone is and how they relate to everyone else. And that number is around 150.
So bigger groups just don't work as well.
They become harder to manage socially. Think about Hutterite communities. They traditionally split their colonies when they get close to 150 people. They feel it's crucial for maintaining social harmony and shared identity.
A tipping point for groups themselves.
Kind of, yeah. Or think about companies like Gore Associates, famous for Gore-Tex. They intentionally keep their plant sizes below this number, believing it fosters better communication, innovation, and a sense of community.
And in smaller groups, maybe information flows better too.
Yes, that links to the idea of transactive memory. In smaller, tight-knit groups, people implicitly know who knows what. So you don't all need to know everything, you know who to ask. It makes the group collectively smarter. And context isn't just about big things like group size or citywide crime. It's also about the immediate situation. The famous Good Samaritan study is a stark example.
What happened there?
Seminary students were asked to give a talk. Some were told they were running late, others that they had plenty of time. On the way, they passed someone clearly in distress. Being in a hurry had a massive effect on whether they stopped to help, much bigger than their underlying personality or religious beliefs. Just the simple context of being late drastically changed their behavior.
Wow. That really shows the power of the immediate situation.
It really does. Our environment and immediate circumstances shape us much more than we often like to admit.
Okay, so these three rules, the law of the few, the stickiness factor, and the power of context together, they paint this picture of how small things can trigger these big shifts. What are the big takeaways here? How can we apply this?
Well, understanding these principles offers a really different way to think about creating change, doesn't it? Whether you're an educator, a parent, in marketing, business, or even public policy.
Wow.
Instead of trying to reach everyone with a kind of watered-down approach, The law of the few suggests maybe you should focus your efforts on finding and engaging those key connectors, mavens, and salesmen.
Target the influencers.
Right. And the stickiness factor tells us we need to think really hard about crafting messages that actually resonate, that are memorable, practical, and easy to act on, not just loud.
Make the message count.
Make it count. And the power of context reminds us that sometimes the most effective way to change behavior is to change the environment, even in subtle ways. Those small contextual shifts can have surprisingly large effects.
It really does suggest a different approach. Less brute force, more finesse, maybe? More targeted interventions.
Exactly. It's about understanding the levers that actually work. It suggests that maybe you can create positive social epidemics, make good ideas contagious by being smart about these principles.
It certainly makes you think about how suggestible we can be, how much context and key people influence us, often without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. It kind of challenges that idea that the world is just fixed, that things are the way they are. It suggests change is possible, sometimes through surprisingly small, intelligent pushes in the right places.
We have definitely taken a deep dive today into how these, yes, seemingly tiny factors can snowball into huge shifts in trends and behaviors. Really makes you think, doesn't it, about the connectors, mavens, and salesmen, maybe in your own life, and how they might be shaping the flow of ideas around you. And it makes you consider the stickiness, or lack thereof, of messages you see every day,
And the power of your environment.
and the subtle or not so subtle power of the places you're in. It feels like the world isn't quite as set in stone as it sometimes seems. Understanding these tipping points really does open up the idea that change can be initiated deliberately.
Indeed. And maybe it leaves you with a final thought to chew on. Given these dynamics, the few, the message, the context, what small tweak in your own world, your own approach might just have a much bigger ripple effect than you currently imagine.
Thank you for your support and for listening.